afternoon, Majority Officer Schmidt and the rest of the legislature. I was here back in October at the public safety meeting, or the public safety portion. We were talking about the budget. Sheriff Spazzato was here talking about the cuts that they'll be making at the jail. At that time, he said he was going to be doing $5 million worth of cuts, but there's no plans. And to this day, there still is no plans. But yet before you, there's a county ordinance that's before the legislature today that's going to call for layoffs and demotions of hundreds of employees throughout the county. How it specifically relates to the members of the Sheriff Officers Association is that it's going to authorize County Executive Mangano and Sheriff Spazzato to demote 45 correction corporals, 45 frontline supervisors that provide supervision of officers and inmates in the housing areas and other areas at the correctional facility. It seriously cuts the tools needed for providing health and safety of the officers, inmates, and the visitors at the jail. Now, corporals at the jail are responsible for supervising small groups of subordinate officers on a particular floor or corridor and maintaining order and supervising the conduct of inmates. They make inspection tours to ensure correctional officers are alert and diligent in their duties and perform inmate counts. They supervise the movement of inmates, and they handle any emergency situations that may arise on their tour. Removing a corporal from a housing area or unit would be the equivalent of removing a fire lieutenant from a fire truck responding to an emergency. When you're working shorthanded and without a supervisor on scene, directly on scene to command the officers and to lead them, it will take longer for them to safely react and put the fire out. When you're talking about potential incidents and insurrections at the jail, it's very much like a fire scene. If it takes you longer to get water on the fire is going to grow, and it gets out of control, and people could get hurt and get killed. It takes you longer to respond and react to an incident in a housing area. A small incident, such as 2 inmates fighting, is going to grow. And it's going to grow into an all-out riot in a matter of seconds. It has the potential to lead into an all-out riot in a matter of seconds. And people can get seriously hurt or possibly killed if it is not quelled immediately with the proper responsive officers and proper supervision from supervisors. Demoting the 45 corporals and removing them from the housing areas would violate the department's own SOPs, their rules and regulations, civil service specs for certain job titles. It changes the way staff would be able to respond to emergencies, reduce post coverage, which have serious implications on the safety of officers and inmates at the jail. When these corporals are demoted, it will lead to numerous lawsuits from the inmates for failure to supervise and to protect them, as well as lawsuits from the union for working out of title. Any money that is claimed as savings in 2012 will be given back through courts many times over. It's another example of the county being penny-wise and dollar-foolish. But demoting these corporals will also affect the county's ability to get revenue from housing other inmates at our correctional center. The State Commission of Correction would have the ability to deny Nassau County and revoke their permission to have what they call 504 transfers, which is Correction Law Section 504 transfers from other jurisdictions. That section of the law allows other municipalities to house their inmates in Nassau County. That has to be approved by the State Commission. Now, Acting Sheriff Spazzato at the time in March wrote a letter to the State Commission of Correction when he was trying to get permission from them to house the inmates from Suffolk County in our correctional center. And in that letter dated March 15th, which we have on a FOIL request right here, he writes that, and this is a quote, "It should be noted that this department has multi-levels of supervision in the jail, which no doubt is critical to safe and secure facility operations, administration, and management. We have 160 supervisors in the ranks of corporal, sergeant, lieutenant, and captain." That's a quote from Acting Sheriff Spazzato at the time. Only because of that level of supervision, and despite the fact that Nassau County is still violating the proper State Commission of Correction required facility administration and management levels. They don't have the deputy undersheriffs that the state requires them to have. Because of the supervision they have of the corporals, sergeants, lieutenants, and captains, they were given permission to house these inmates in the Nassau County Jail. So when he's trying to get permission to house the inmates here to make money, he says we have proper supervision. But after we get the inmates, and we're getting $4 million of revenue from Suffolk County and other municipalities, he's saying that we have too much supervision, and he wants to demote 45 corporals, 45 frontline supervisors from the jail.
Your 3 minutes have expired.
Thank you. I think the state would have some serious concerns and will quite possibly rethink their decision to allow us to use these, to house these other inmates. Sheriff Spazzato claimed in October he was claiming $4 million of savings in the 2012 budget from housing these inmates. But now it seems to me to be a pretty big gamble, and the taxpayers of Nassau County cannot afford to lose that $4 million of revenue. History of the jail is no secret. It should be no secret to anybody up there. As far back as a decade ago, we were under federal oversight from the Department of Justice, which mandated increased medical care for inmates, increased supervision of inmates and officers, and increased training for officers. Department of Justice mandates right here. Now we fast forward to 2011. The county, what do? They cut training. We used to have 40 hours of annual in-service. They cut it down to 16 hours of annual in-service. They cut supervision at the jail, and they privatized medical and cut the medical care at the jail. And if we're not smart enough to learn from our history, we're doomed to repeat it. It's not a question of if the Department of Justice will be back investigating problems at the jail. It will happen, and it's only a matter of when. And it will not be the fault of the correctional officers and the supervisors at the jail when this occurs. It will be the fault of Ed Mangano, Sheriff Spazzato, and every one of you up there who votes to put forward this ordinance. Thank you.
I have a question. First of all, thank you for coming. But bottom line, in terms of public safety of the people working in the jail, particularly the correctional officers, the members of your community, as well as anyone else affected by public safety at the jail, how would this vote, how would implementation of this law, if you will, or this item, harm hurt public safety at the jail?
Well, what's interesting is you're voting on an ordinance today that none of you up there have any idea how it's going to be implemented. Because I have no idea how it's going to be implemented. We went to sit down with Sheriff Spazzato. Sheriff Spazzato has no idea how this is going to be implemented. He has not told anyone how he's going to reduce 45 frontline supervisors from inside the jail and remove their manpower from the floors. Just yesterday alone, we had an incident at the jail when several officers got injured with an inmate. The inmate was taken to medical, the officers went to the hospital. Sheriff Spazzato at 11 o'clock locked down the whole jail. After the incident happened at 8 o'clock in the morning, there was no more safety issues. But he locked it down, not for the safety issues at the jail, for budget reasons. And all the inmates stayed locked in. None of the inmates went to rec, they went to church services, which they're required to do by the state. But he locked it down because he was trying to save money. So we were on midnight post coverage the whole night. And it was for budget reasons, not for safety issues. There was no threat at the jail at that time. But you know, they're managing this jail not following the guidelines they're supposed to. They're managing just for monetary reasons. And it's creating health and safety issues at the jail.
So just to be clear, what you're cautioning against is something akin to what we went through at budget, where you're passing a budget that closes 2 precincts, but we don't know which ones and how.
Absolutely.
We would be passing something that has to be implemented, and we won't know how. So when we're voting, we can't even judge or consider what the adverse effect on public safety would be.
Absolutely, you are correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Boyle?